Picture the coldest night you've ever experienced. Then imagine that being the normal Tuesday for thousands of years straight. That was the Ice Age. Average temperatures across large parts of Europe and Asia sat well below freezing for most of the year. And this wasn't a short cold snap either. It lasted for tens of thousands of years at a time. And here's the myth we need to get rid of first. Cave people did not just wrap a random animal skin around themselves and call it a day. That image is basically a cartoon, and it would have gotten someone killed within a single winter. What people actually did was closer to real engineering, using tools, techniques, and materials that scientists are still uncovering evidence for today. Let's start with the most surprising discovery, because it doesn't come from clothing at all. It comes from lice. Human body lice, the kind that live in clothing rather than hair, evolved from head lice at some point in our history. Head lice need to grip onto hair strands to survive, but body lice evolved specifically to live and lay eggs in fabric and fiber instead, which means they could only have evolved once humans were regularly wearing something to live in. By studying the genetic differences between these two types of lice, scientists estimated roughly when humans started regularly wearing clothing. The answer came out to somewhere around 170,000 years ago, which is far earlier than most people assume. That means clothing wasn't some late invention. It was already a core survival technology, deep into the Ice Age, possibly linked to humans preparing to migrate into colder northern regions. Now here's where the just furs myth really falls apart. Simply draping a hide over your shoulders does very little against genuinely brutal cold, especially with wind involved. What actually works is fitted, layered clothing. And we have direct physical proof that Ice Age humans were doing exactly that. Bone needles have been found at multiple sites, including one at Denisova Cave in Siberia, dating back roughly 40 to 50,000 years, making it one of the oldest sewing tools ever discovered. These weren't crude tools either. Some needles had tiny eyes drilled through one end, fine enough to thread sinew or plant fiber, meaning people were genuinely stitching material together, not just poking holes in it. Stitching mattered, because sewn clothing traps warm air against the body far more effectively than loose draped skins ever could. A tailored hood, tight sleeves, and a snug fit around the waist can be the difference between survivable cold and fatal cold, especially with strong wind involved. Materials mattered just as much as the stitching technique itself. Different animal hides were likely chosen for different purposes, since fur density, thickness, and wind resistance vary a lot between species. Reindeer and caribou hide, for example, has hollow hair fibers that trap air extremely well, which is exactly why many Arctic cultures throughout history have favored it specifically for winter clothing. And there's good reason to think Ice Age humans discovered this same advantage through simple trial and error, long before anyone wrote it down. One of the clearest windows into this comes from a burial site called Sungir in Russia, dated to around 30,000 years ago. Archaeologists found thousands of small ivory beads at this site. And here's the key detail. The beads weren't scattered randomly. They were arranged in clear lines that matched the outline of fitted garments, like sewn on decoration, tracing the shape of shirts, trousers, and even footwear. This gives us an actual blueprint of Ice Age clothing design, showing fitted trousers, long-sleeve tops, and separate foot coverings, essentially an early version of a full-body cold weather outfit. What's remarkable is just how much detail survived through those bead placements alone. Researchers were able to map out sleeve lengths, waistbands, and even what appeared to be fitted shoe uppers, purely from where thousands of tiny beads had fallen, relative to the skeletons after the organic clothing itself had long since decayed away. This means fitted, Tailored clothing wasn't rare or experimental by this point. It was detailed enough and valued enough that people were decorating it carefully for a formal burial, which tells us it held real cultural importance, not just practical use. Clothing alone wasn't the whole strategy either. Skin itself needed protection too. Evidence and comparisons with more recent cold climate cultures suggest that rendered animal fat was likely used as a protective layer on exposed skin, helping to block wind and retain heat on the face and hands. Similar to how modern Arctic explorers still use grease-based skin protection today, fire was obviously essential. But it's worth understanding just how central it actually was to daily survival, not just for warmth, but for drying out clothing that had gotten wet from snow or sweat. Wet clothing in extreme cold isn't just uncomfortable. It can be lethal within hours, since wet fur and hide lose most of their insulating properties almost immediately. This means fire management wasn't a luxury. It was a constant, deliberate, daily task, likely assigned specifically within a group, to make sure the fire never fully died out overnight. Starting a fire from scratch wasn't simple either. Evidence from multiple Ice Age sites shows the use of fire-starting kits, including flint struck against pyrite, a naturally occurring mineral that throws off hot sparks when struck at the right angle, similar in principle to a modern flint and steel. These sparks were caught in prepared tinder, often dried fungus or shredded plant fiber, showing a level of preparation and repeated practice that goes far beyond just accidentally discovering fire once and hoping for the best. Shelter design mattered just as much as clothing. Many Ice Age dwellings were built low and compact on purpose, minimizing exposed surface area to reduce heat loss, similar to how modern igloos are shaped for the exact same reason. Some structures used thick layers of packed snow or turf as outer insulation, since snow itself, strange as it sounds, can actually act as a decent insulating barrier once packed correctly, trapping a layer of still air inside its structure. Sleeping arrangements were engineered too. Groups slept close together intentionally, sharing body heat, often on raised platforms made from packed grass, moss, or hide layers to avoid direct contact with cold ground, since the earth itself pulls heat away from a sleeping body far faster than most people realize. Footwear is another detail people usually get wrong in the popular imagination. Bare feet or thin wraps would have caused rapid frostbite in these conditions. While we don't have perfectly preserved Ice Age shoes from the very earliest periods, related archaeological finds, like a remarkably well-preserved leather shoe found in a cave in Armenia dating back around 5,500 years, show that structured, fitted footwear techniques existed early in human history and were almost certainly present in some form much earlier as well. Put all of this together, and a much more accurate picture starts to form. Fitted, layered clothing, stitched with bone needles, grease-based skin protection. Constant, carefully managed fire started with prepared flint and pyrite kits. Insulated compact shelters, shared body heat during sleep, and likely some form of structured footwear. This wasn't a group of people simply enduring the cold through sheer toughness. It was a genuinely sophisticated survival system, refined and passed down across countless generations, that allowed humans to live and even thrive in some of the harshest sustained conditions our species has ever faced. And honestly, that's the part that deserves more credit than it usually gets. None of this technology showed up overnight. It was tested, adjusted, and improved by real people living through real winters, generation after generation, until fitted clothing, reliable fire, and smart shelter design became second nature rather than lucky guesswork. So the next time you picture a caveman shivering under a single animal skin, remember, the real picture looks a lot more like early cold weather engineering than anything close to that stereotype. If you want to see exactly how they made fire from scratch, using nothing but stone, wood, and patience, subscribe, because that process alone is more clever than most people expect.